Okay, good morning, everybody, or early noon, and welcome to this webinar on challenge-based innovation. This is our third webinar in the series on youth entrepreneurship. My name is Mart Veliste. I am one of the thematic experts on SME competitiveness on the Interreg Europe policy learning platform, who is hosting this series today. And together with me is my colleague René Denison, who will be moderating the questions. So you can see him as well. And of course, we have our speaker, Piet. So Piet, you can turn on your camera for a second to let everybody to see you. And we are the three people who will be interacting in today's session. As I mentioned, this is our third meeting on youth entrepreneurship. Why we have tackled this topic over the past 3 weeks is because it seems to be a bit of a challenge on the European level, whereas research has shown that around 40% of young people would like to be self-employed and be entrepreneurs, but the reality is that in the age group from 20 to 29-year-old, only around 6.5% are actually self-employed. So there is a gap between the wish or the want and the realities, and therefore we find it relevant to share these good practices and examples of how different regions have been promoting youth entrepreneurship. Now we're using this GoToWebinar tool today. In the chat function, this is our communication with you. We'll be sharing a few relevant links in the chat. And there's also a handouts section where you can download some materials we've uploaded about the content of today's webinar. Then, of course, we encourage you to ask questions throughout the session. You can use this in the questions function, and they will come to us, the moderators, and we will then take them and ask them from our speaker. And today's session will be recorded, and both the video as well as the slides and the other materials you will be seeing will be shared afterwards. But let's jump into the topic. As I already mentioned, this is part of a three-part series in a mini-series session. So we have these 30-minute short webinars we've been running for the past 3 weeks. Some of you maybe have attended the earlier sessions, but if not, that's fine, because they do function as standalone events as well. But just a quick recap. So in the first session, we tackled youth entrepreneurship in a really young age. So we had these nice examples from East Flanders on practices being used on the primary and secondary school level. And perhaps the key learning from that session was that indeed it's best to work with youth throughout their educational journey to sort of plant the seeds and thoughts of entrepreneurship and to develop the creativeness and willingness to explore this career avenue. Then last week we moved on to a bit of a slightly older age group, which is the vocational education students. We had interesting experience from Andalusia and Prende, and there I would say that the key learning was that that you need to really develop the mindset of the youth and to provide the skills. And even if not all of these students become entrepreneurs, these skills will go a long way in their career, even as employed people. And always with these programs, in both cases, with young age and with vocational education, it's important to, especially if you work with teachers, it's important to provide support and guidance to the teachers involved in the programs. But today we're in our third session, and of course we'll quickly jump into the content of that. So today's speaker is Piet Boomsma, who's going to talk about this Knowledge Alliance Rhine-Waal and two tracks or activities within it. So one is a pressure cooker challenge-based ideation program, and then also a young SME subsidy scheme. But Piet is also a member of the KISS ME Interreg Europe project, and this project really works on improving the innovation capacity of SMEs across Europe. So it's a bit broader than what we're tackling today, but I do encourage also for you to look at that the project website link that will be shared with you in the chat. But then Piet, are you with me on the screen?
Yes, I am.
Great. So I will change my slides because I'll be showing them for you. Then just please let me know when I should change the slide.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to tell you about my experiences with challenge-based innovation within the Rhine-Waal Knowledge Alliance, which was one of the best practices within the Interreg Europe KISS ME project. By way of introduction, I will show you a short animation of the Knowledge Alliance. Please, Mart, start it.
Do you sometimes look across the border? Innovative entrepreneurs do that constantly. They look for new solutions, new products, new markets. Just like scientists, they search for what goes beyond what we already know, outside the boundaries of the familiar. In the Euregio Rhine-Waal, on the border of two economically powerful European countries, people are working on innovations. The challenge is to break the traditional boundaries between entrepreneurs and scientists who can develop and deliver innovative solutions together.
Next slide, please. The project ran between 2012 and 2015. 6 universities and 2 chambers of commerce participated in the project, and I was the project coordinator on behalf of the Euregio Rhine-Waal. The idea behind the project was that entrepreneurship, innovation, and internationalization should go hand in hand in today's economy. However, where much knowledge is developed, namely at universities, the step to entrepreneurship is still a big one. We therefore focused our project on students, recent graduates, and university staff. The design of the project guided our target groups from theory to practice. Firstly, it looked at what fields we were good at in our region, both in science and in economics. And in addition, education in various aspects of entrepreneurship was provided. The education was complemented by training in entrepreneurial behavior. And last but not least, we organized a subsidy scheme for our target group. Click. The last 2 components of our program are the subject of today's webinar. They are challenge-based activities. The pressure cooker, a method to find innovative business solutions within 1 day, and our grant program. I will first tell you about the pressure cooker. The title says it all. Everything must be done under high pressure. But you can also want to go too fast. The invitation to the first pressure cooker at the German universities you see now consisted of a poster and a message on a website. This did not get the required response. The Dutch universities were more aware of the entrepreneurial students and invited them personally. We also did not have any concrete business issues yet. Once we had those, and the German universities also approached students personally, we found enough participants for our first pressure cooker. Click. What does the pressure cooker involve? We don't have an extensive manual for it. We have a recipe. First of all, we need a number of students, we need an inspiring location, and then we need 25 until 50 students. Vans to bring the students to the location, good guidance from creativity coaches, and cases for which an innovation solution can be devised. Furthermore, good energy, so sufficient and good food, and finally a jury that hands out a prize. For the jury, we invited independent representatives from both science and economics. Click. The recipe consists of a number of simple steps. The students come to the location, get to know each other over a coffee, and are then set to work by creativity coaches with an impossible task in diverse groups. They had to make a chair from paper, tape, rope, and a pen. And immediately the ice broke and interesting solutions have arisen. After an hour, each group met the entrepreneur who had brought in a business issue. This issue had been presented in advance and students were allowed to sign up for it. But not everyone got their first choice. The entrepreneur could be questioned by the group. After lunch, the student group selected solutions in absence of the entrepreneurs, so without possible influence of the entrepreneur on their creativity. At the end of the afternoon, however, the groups discussed the solutions with the entrepreneur and then received a short pitch training. With full stomachs, the pitches had to be presented, after which the jury selected the best solution to the problem. We organized the pressure cooker twice. You can click. Bringing the lessons we had learned the first time into practice in the second episode. The most important lessons were: prepare business cases earlier to find students, organize all logistics, and think about follow-up. Click. The cost of the event amounted to between 5,000 and 10,000 euros. But of course, when only students from the own university participate, it may be considerably cheaper. The transfer of the pressure cooker has not really taken off. The Rhine-Waal University of Applied Sciences in Kleve, Germany, still organizes a pressure cooker day every year. Other Knowledge Alliance universities use the instrument under a different name. And during my preparation for this webinar, I discovered that the Rotterdam University of Applied Sciences has copied the format. Click. Whereas the pressure cooker was mainly for learning purposes, the Knowledge Alliance subsidy scheme was intended to actually allow innovations to emerge in knowledge-intensive startups around universities. Our contact persons at the universities knew these companies and sought their participation. Because of time constraints, I cannot go through the organization of the complete subsidy scheme in detail. But if you want to make an own subsidy scheme, I can share all our documents on the procedure and the subsidy regulations with you. The subsidy scheme aimed at cooperation between German and Dutch startups in the development of a new product. We organized a number of visits to the participating universities where the startups could meet and forge partnerships. Together, they then had to develop a project plan to create a new product for their company. The plans were put on paper and assessed by me to see if they met the minimum requirements. And then the startups had to present their plans in front of a jury. When a project was accepted, it was intensely supervised scientifically by the universities, as well as by the region Rhine-Waal in fulfilling the grant regulations. Click. The most important grant regulations were that it had to be an innovation project of at least one German and one Dutch company, and the jury had to give a positive advice to subsidize the project. If that was the case, the project could receive a grant of up to 70% of the cost and up to 70,000 euros. The cost of the project consisted of personnel costs, material costs, and travel expenses. The companies had to prove in advance that they could pay an own contribution of the other 30%. The companies could declare their costs every 2 months, but had to pre-finance them. The jury evaluated the project according to the following criteria: the innovativeness of the product, the feasibility of the project, both in technical and economic terms, the entrepreneurial capabilities of the project partners, the commitment of the partners, and their international awareness. Click. We had a budget over €1 million available for the subsidy program, and about the same for the support and guidance of the participants. A lot of money, but very nice results have achieved, which were presented to the world in our own innovation circus, of which I have a small film. Mart, if you show that one.
Yeah, just a second.
The Interreg Rhine-Waal is located on the border of 2 economically powerful European countries, the Netherlands and Germany. No less than 16 innovative ideas have been realized with the aid of Knowledge Alliance Rhine-Waal since the start of the project, at the end of 2012. In a joint effort, Dutch and German entrepreneurs have found new solutions to questions and problems concerning the market and society. Great aspirations have led to highly diverse, innovative and creative products. The Interreg Rhine-Waal increasingly develops as an attractive and competitive region that invests in knowledge and innovation. 16 innovative products which are to conquer the market. Discover them now.
Yeah, you're not going to discover them now because it would go too far to show all these products, but I'll show you the lessons we learned here on the slide, and stress the most important lesson: provide the startup guidance and do not create unnecessary bureaucracy. Next slide. The grant program has been transferred mainly within the Interreg Germany-Netherlands program. We use the same methodology for innovation projects in digitalization and for innovation projects for sustainable energy products. Within the KISS ME project of Interreg Europe, we have been able to exchange experiences with the Be Light program implemented in the border region of Hungary and Croatia. Next. The KISS ME project has allowed us to look at what our subsidy scheme has generated 4 years after the project ended. I will not list it all, you can read it on the slide. We are satisfied and proud of it. If you are interested, you can download the brochure of the Knowledge Alliance, and you can always email or call me for detailed information. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Piet, and I'll also ask René to join us on screen. So, and while René is still screening the audience questions, maybe I can ask you as a first thing regarding the pressure cooker, that how did you manage to get the companies interested in providing their real life cases or challenges to the program?
Yeah, actually, it was not that difficult because there are quite a lot of firms looking for personnel. And around the universities, there are most of the times groups of entrepreneurs who visit the university now and then, And we just used our regular contacts and asked entrepreneurs if they were interested. They knew they had to spend one complete day of one person of their firm, but that was not difficult to find them. We just started too late to ask them.
Okay, I mean it's always good if the market situation also demands this sort of support, and there is the inherent interest from the companies. René, do we have any audience questions?
I don't see any questions from audience, but I have one myself, so I can start with that. And please, everybody, if you have questions about the pressure cooker, please write them down to the chat while we are asking questions from our side. So I wanted to touch, Piet, what you said on the facts that after the kind of trial period was over, only one university actually was still using the pressure cooker approach afterwards. And can you perhaps elaborate a bit more why did the other universities decide to drop it, and what was missing, or why did they didn't see a good value in it to continue with it?
Yeah, the pressure cooker day was just one event on one day, and one of the universities has decided to keep on doing that. There are other universities that have changed the format to a complete program through the year. For example, for the solar boat race or the solar car race that is organized in Australia every year, one of the universities has a complete year in which students solve this problem. The same university invites entrepreneurs from their own region with questions that also take longer to solve. The pressure cooker was just there for students to get to know other students from other cities and work on the idea. So the internationalization was our idea to bring in to the concept. But there are quite a lot of universities that are rather international on itself. So we didn't need to bring all the universities together.
Okay, thank you, Piet. And now we have got also one question from the audience, so I will read it to you. So, do you have numbers on how many projects came from the pressure cooker day to the KISS ME funding program startups, or there was no direct relation? So if I understand the question, was there a connection between the cooker day and the subsidy?
No, it was a pity that it was not the case. The complete project period was only 3 years, and we directly started with looking for student companies that wanted to fit in the subsidy scheme, and this was rather a time-taking procedure. But after a year, we found the student firms, but also firms from people who were not studying anymore, but still being around of the universities. We had also a number of firms of university personnel that wanted to put their knowledge into an idea. And one of these firms will be really a big breakthrough in the future, I suspect, because they are going to change the barcode of products into a digital one.
I can also maybe follow up on this and ask you about this review of the Knowledge Alliance and then especially the subsidy scheme. you did within the Interreg Europe KISS ME project. I think it's not often that we have the luxury or the chance to go back and review the results of a project we had a few years ago. So how was this exercise for you, and what did you learn from this experience?
Yeah, that it was very interesting. Most of the times we were asked to find best practices that are still running, and then you can't see what the effects of these projects are. Now we had the chance to pick a project which was already finished, and of course, as we expected, not all firms exist anymore. It's normal that about half of them dies within 5 years. But what we saw was that our firms stayed longer. We had about 75% of the firms that still exist. And sometimes people think that after a firm has developed a new project, the project is on the market, and that is a very wrong idea. It takes much longer for firms to find the way to the market after it has been developed. And we saw that 4 products were already on the market. We had a number of products which were still in development. So, for example, this change of the barcode, this will take about 15 years until the market will accept a complete new barcode. So it was interesting to see. We also saw what happened to the entrepreneurs, the young entrepreneurs, and some were not entrepreneur anymore, but they had the internationalization within themselves, incorporated in themselves, Dutch persons working in Germany and the other way around.
Yeah, I find it very, very interesting. And also from my own experience, having done some program evaluations, that really the ex post analysis is very interesting and very relevant sometimes. And also in a way that the impact you might report at the end of the project it can be much less than what you actually see in 5 years later, that the seed that was planted or the process that began is now something very, very important. For example, from my region in Tartu, there was in the past an Interreg Estonia-Latvia program where there was a co-working or this sort of a showroom developed, which by today, years later, is one of the main sort of innovation hub centers of the city. And this began from a EU-funded project years ago. And now it's self-sustainable. So I think it's very, very important for all of us as policymakers or as program managers or analysts to also take this long-term perspective sometimes and see what happened before. Unfortunately, time is pressing on. I will again emphasize, as Piet was saying, that we actually have a rich amount of information and materials and willingness to Piet to share it with you. Some of the materials are in the handouts. We will also put materials into the link shared with you afterwards. And indeed, some of these are very detailed about how the application form for the program looked like, or what were the regulations involved. So if you're really keen on implementing something similar, there is more rich information we can share with you. Thank you, Piet, for your intervention and for sharing your thoughts. If there are still some questions coming from the audience, we will tackle them after the webinar and can get back to the people via email. I'll just use these last few minutes to once again share my screen and tell you what happens next, because we are now at the end of the journey with our 3-part series of the mini webinar. So we have this next webinar coming up quite soon, actually, on the 10th of June, which nicely follows up today's session, because the overall title is about collaborative and open innovation, which also includes within itself challenge-based innovation. And this webinar is divided into 2 topics, one that also involves students, and then more with startups. So if today's session and the weeks before have been relevant for you, I also encourage you to join this session on the 10th of June. And we'll put into the chat the link for reading more about it and registering for it as well. Then if you're new to our events, I just want to mention once more that this webinar was brought to you today by the Policy Learning Platform. It's a community of European policymakers and experts. You can visit our website and find many useful tools and previous sort of knowledge bites in form of policy briefs or virtual events recordings. I can also say that I would encourage you to check the Good Practices database on our website. In these past 3 weeks with our mini-series, we've been touching on the topic and bringing you nice examples from various regions. But you can look around and there are other similar cases that we could have featured from Germany, from France, and again from Belgium and elsewhere. The Start Academy on the screen here is actually from Vlaio. If you remember from our first week, we had experts from Vlaio, East Flanders, talking about their pre and secondary school education programs, but they actually also have one for university level that's a bit maybe similar or has some similarities, but also differences with the pressure cooker. So once you get the slides, I encourage you to also click on the links provided to read more about them. And of course, then we provide services, free services for regional policymakers. There's the matchmaking session that I recommend for you, where we can give you advice, tailored advice in a 2-hour setting. And we'll end today's meeting after I stop speaking. We will end it with a video on our more extensive service called the peer review service. But once again, thank you, Piet, thank you, René, for today's session. Thank you all for joining today, and if you've been here with us for longer, then thank you for this as well. And we will end with the video.
Do you work for a regional or a local authority that is particularly interested in exploring new policy topics in innovation, environment, low carbon economy or SME competitiveness? If so, the Policy Learning Platform is made for you, and we have a new golden service, which is the peer review. Now we are opening a call that is permanently available for you to apply, no deadline, you can apply whenever suits you, and the peer review offers you the great, excellent opportunity to interact with our thematic experts and with other peers across Europe to help you solve your policy challenge.